So we can continue the program now. It's our pleasure to have John Barnes here. So John Barnes is the CEO and founder of Entangled Positions. She is the monthly most influential CEO 2025 UK, with staffing and recruitment services, a tech recruiter since 2004, who has worked in quantum since 2014. He founded Entangled Positions, as I said, to deliver ethical excellence to the quantum ecosystem. He is a speaker, community builder, special advisor for workforce and talent at the Quantum Strategy Institute, and was formerly the founding president of One Quantum UK and Europe. He advises multiple government and super-governmental organizations, including the UK and the UN. His day-to-day work is connecting talented people with roles in quantum technologies. Having had tens of thousands of conversations regarding people's career and hiring needs has given a deep-seated and unique view, offering stability in a consistently uncertain sector. And he will talk today about transitioning from academia to industry. So many people using academia as stepping stone into the quantum workforce. What are the best things to understand to help navigate this tricky step? There are many similarities as well as distinct differences between academia and industry to demystify. We will look at practical advice around job hunting, like CVs and applications, how to master a diverse, inclusive global ecosystem. We will dive into the mindset of hiring managers and HR professionals, and we will address some of the challenges around mindset, just as the benefit of resilience and overcoming imposter syndrome. Finally, and most importantly, we will get you thinking about what is important to you and why. So, John, we are very happy to have you. And with that, I give it to you.
Thank you, Sandra, and welcome everyone today. We're here obviously for Qubit Hub's Quantum Qiskit Fall Fest 2025, celebrating 100 years of quantum mechanics with IBM Quantum. And as mentioned, today's talk is to give guidance on the transition from academia to industry. So I would start by saying I always think industry is a bit of a strange terminology for working with, sort of quantum optics and machine learning and all the things that go into quantum. I think it reminds me of coal mines and chimneys and things like that. So, but it's a proxy for commercial arena or governmental arena. So, as mentioned, I'm founder and CEO of Entangled Positions and have over a decade working within quantum in the quantum jobs market and over 2 decades working in the wider tech market. So I've seen quite a lot of changes over those times, but one thing that stays the same is it's always a pleasure to speak to those at the real forefront of changing the world, and especially those who don't realize quite what role they will play in that just yet. So that's really exciting. And whilst it's brilliant to work in the sector and see all the amazing things, I do get a little bit jealous because nobody lets me play with the lasers or write the algorithms. So I'm sure some of you are doing cooler things than I do, but I just get to talk to everyone doing the cool stuff. So with today's talk, just to really set the scene of today's talk in terms of why we're here. So today I aim to demystify, encourage and empower. So by that, in terms of demystify what to expect and what's expected of you, to encourage, to break down some of the misconceptions that there might be, and to empower, most importantly, which is to give you the information to make informed decisions and take control of your future. So with this talk, I'd like to make it as fitting as possible and relate to you in the audience as much as possible. So with that, please do bring your questions to the talk. I'll try to break to the audience at regular intervals. And with questions, the tougher the better. If you can really bring some hard questions that really make me think, then I'm also learning during the talk as well, and that's a good thing. So one of the things that may be different to a lot of the talks that you see is I'm not going to be working with slides today. And the reason for that is people aren't data, people aren't pictures. It's a human interaction is important, or actually to some of the physicists out there call them messy biological systems. But it's much more about humans, and I think data and graphs and pictures doesn't do that justice. So just to start off with, really, to sort of frame the landscape that we're working within at the moment, and looking at the quantum jobs market as a whole, which is a really buoyant market. It sits across, we talk about the quantum jobs market as one place, but it sits across multiple sectors. It covers optics, it covers software and algorithms, it covers sensing, it covers compute, it covers communications and security, biology, and so many other sectors. So we're not focused just on one specific aspect. You should also bear in mind that the quantum jobs market is inherently global. There's a high rate of people that have within the ecosystem that have relocated and changed countries once or multiple times. And it actually offers an opportunity for those working in the sector to explore the world and earn money whilst doing that. So for those with an interest in traveling and experiencing various cultures, quantum's really is a ticket to do so. And I think with that, it's worth bearing in mind as well that the quantum jobs market evolves extremely rapidly. So we look at roles at the moment, and there's positions that didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago, and through your career there's going to be jobs that people in this audience will be in and will be excelling at that do not yet exist. So just bear that in mind, that you don't have to fit neatly into a specific box at all times. And within that, though, we should bear in mind that the research component is still the foundation of quantum technologies and the industry that surrounds that. Within most organizations, it's an unusually large percentage of total staff. With most sectors within technology, the research departments aren't as high a percentage of total staff as they are within quantum. But that is set against a backdrop whereby the other roles, so for example, the more commercially focused roles, they're starting from a smaller base as a percentage of total headcount, but those number of roles are growing more and more quickly, as you would expect with any revenue generating organization. And we see that across so many different areas. So when you look at the types of roles that evolve, so when looking at academia, there's very much a focus on lab-based experimentalists, mathematicians, good developers, and actually these are all fantastically important. But what we're also seeing a lot of is people that are able to translate quantum to different audiences. So someone who can translate between the hardware and software, for example. Someone who can translate between different languages and integrate the pieces or compile other languages. Someone that, as in software languages, but also who can translate languages, so from Spanish to English or other languages around the world. Then there's the people who translate from technology to business. So how someone speaks to a CEO or a CFO is very different to how someone talks to a hardware experimentalist or a product manager or a number of different other roles, or the general public, as well as politicians. And this communication aspect is really important. And the other thing is, within the quantum ecosystem, it's an extremely inclusive, diverse sector, but it's not without challenges, as you would see within any ecosystem, any sector. So what I would encourage, so in a moment, I'm going to ask the audience to if there's any questions on the things I've mentioned. So please do put any questions into the chat. Sandra, I don't know whether you would like to moderate if there's any questions coming through about what I've just mentioned, or if I go into the chat.
So normally, if the questions show up and you would like to answer them directly, you can do that. If we get
Perfect.
many questions, I'd maybe try to moderate. But for the moment, we take it how they come in.
Perfect. Excellent. No, that's perfect. So,
And you got your first question.
great. So, what do I think is consumed more? I'm not sure what you mean by consumed in this context. Perhaps if you want to, if you wouldn't mind just adding some clarity to that. And whilst you're doing that, I'd just like to come back to the thing I mentioned about jobs evolving. So, one of the things that we're seeing more of is there's still a real stream of people coming into the ecosystem with PhDs, postdoc, and graduate type degrees, and that's really important and really fundamental. But what we're also seeing is people with those skills transitioning into more commercially focused roles, such as communication specialists, product people, application specialists, and working towards the commercialization. We're also seeing people who don't come from that same academic route that are coming in and applying their skills in things like marketing, in finance, in web development, and all of the other things that grown-up businesses need. So the reason, and that part of the reason I'm referencing this, is that there's a place within quantum for everyone, and the key is to be interested and interesting. And Sandra, I think I just saw the follow-up to that coming into the chat.
It's a new question, and this might be yes.
Yeah. So actually, this is a really good question that I was going to come to later, but I'll bring this forward. So many researchers worry that leaving academia means abandoning science. How can they reframe this transition as an evolution rather than a loss? And this is a great question, because there's a preconception, or two preconceptions, I think, that it is important to break down. And one of them is, once you leave academia and go and work in the commercial arena, you can't come back into academia. And that's not true. I know lots of people that have done it. It's entirely not true. So there's two main challenges with this, or two main factors with this. So one of them is if you go into a commercial role that's heavily driven by intellectual property, you may not be able to publish papers about some of the research you're doing, and you lose the sort of publish or perish type credit that you build up. That's not entirely a blocker on its own. You can still work around that. Your work will still allow you to do that. The other thing is that there's some roles you can go into where you're still encouraged to publish. So from that side of things, the roadway isn't blocked at all. What often happens, though, is when people go from academia to industry, they tend to get paid more money. They get more respect for the work that they're doing. They have more free time. They have to remember how to have hobbies and socialize and things like that. And actually, there's people that don't necessarily want to transition back into academia, particularly if you've bought a house and you've got a mortgage, and coming back into academia means you can't afford the things that you've committed to. So there's an element of that, but I know lots of people that have made that transition. So it certainly isn't a blocker in any way. The other aspect is, some people think that by going into a commercial arena, the kind of the level of science you're performing is reduced. And again, this particularly in quantum, this just isn't the case. There may be roles where people go into a more production focused role where it becomes more engineering, and that may limit the research you do, because your role is focused on production. But actually, the coming into a commercial role, often the level of science is it can be increased or it can be the same. It's often different though, because in research, it's very much about deep dive, thorough research. So you get money to do research in academia. In the commercial arena, you do research to get money, and that means you have to be delivering something. If you're performing research and you have a hard deadline of a certain date, that needs to be done by then. You can't take another year to get your results right. You have a commercial requirement to be delivering on that. So there's a different mindset and it's faster paced. So what you're doing can often be at a higher level. And I'll give you an example of how this preconception can manifest. So around about 10 years ago, I first started working with laser company that was they provide excellent laser equipment for quantum computing companies. So 10 years ago, they were making it ready for companies, and they were delivering it a lot to Nobel laureates and PIs at universities. And I was speaking to people about a scientific sales role, and every time I spoke to PhDs and postdocs about a scientific sales role, they instantly glazed over, switched off, and weren't particularly interested in continuing the conversation. And I was really struggling to find the people who would be interested in this role. And then after a while, what I did, I actually discussed the role with them without saying the job title. So I told them what they would be doing, that they'd be working with Nobel laureates, they'd be working on some of the most advanced systems. That at the time, I think I had these roles for a few years, and there was Nobel prizes won with this equipment whilst I was recruiting for these roles. And you told them about the role, they got really interested. And by the time that I had actually said what the job title was, it didn't matter because they had heard the role. So I think this is something to bear in mind, and then to kind of go to bring that to sort of bring that to circle that square. There were people that I placed into this role, several of them that were postdocs, some on their second and third postdoc, doing really, really high level research, that actually came back afterwards and they said, "Wow, John, I can't believe how much higher level the work I'm doing in this role is than what I was doing at my postdoc." So that, I think, it is. You're exactly right to use the term. I think it was reframe. You said. I think that's exactly right. It's reframing that, as opposed to it not being the case. And I think this is one of the preconceptions that is spread. And the trick is, as a job hunter, is to actually look at what the responsibility is within the role, not just the job title, and also speak to when you're interviewing, speak to the hiring manager or your peers within the team, and find out what the day-to-day looks like, what success and failure looks like, what you're expected to do within your role, as opposed to looking at the job title or the standard terms that come up in all the job descriptions you look at. Actually speak to people and find out about it, because I think that's a really important distinction to make. So the next question actually is kind of alludes on to what was the next topic that I was going to go on to, and that's what you can do to help your chances. So I'm gonna come back to this question, but I just wanted to outline some of the themes related to what you can do to help your chances. And I think the first thing and the most important thing, and if I leave you with one thing in today's talk, it's this. And this is to understand yourself, understand what is important to you, what your passions are, what your drive and motivation is, and what really motivates you. Because so many people ask me, how do I get a job in quantum? What do I need to do? And these are important, but it's only half of the equation, and it's not the half that you control as much. You do control it, but it's not the half that is intrinsic to you. So when you're working in quantum is the physics that underpins the physical universe. So at some point, this will touch on every single part of sort of society. I appreciate that there's maybe a timeline before some of these things come into play, but effectively, the world's your oyster working in quantum. So if you work out what's important to you, you can then plot you can plot the direction and work out what the things you need to do to get to where you want to be. So understanding that the environment that you inspire to work in is also important. So it may be that you want to make for a better environment, work on environmental technology. It might be you want to feed hungry people. It might be you want to earn as much money as possible. It might be that you want to be challenged in your research goals. There's no right or wrong answer to this. It's a personal thing. But if you know what that is that motivates you, that's the biggest and first step. Then along with that, understand what type of environment you want to work in. Is your work-life balance more important to you than say earning lots of money, or is it more important to you that you're working on something that has a big impact, or is it something that has what you would consider scientific integrity? So, and all of these things, again, this is something that you need to look inside yourself and work out. Be honest with yourself. Don't just say what you think people want to hear. Be honest with yourself. And then once you start to frame this, you can then understand what's required to get there, or probably the other side that may actually be more important, what's preventing you from being where you want to be. And once you start to know this, you can then start to go on the journey to gain the skills required to where you want to be. And with that, you can sometimes it's not always clear what that looks like. And the quantum ecosystem is a really friendly, open, helpful place. So a quick win is maybe to reach out to someone who is in a role that you aspire to, and ask them, what was the biggest thing to get them along the way? How have they found that? What if they had their time again? What would they not do? What mistakes would they avoid? And really look into gaining those skills and finding that out. And alongside skills, nurture the attributes required to have a successful career. So in academia, you're often taught a lot about the technical requirements of the research you're performing, but also the attributes you have. These are the things that enable you to excel in a number of different roles. So, communication skills. How do you communicate with people, whether that's face-to-face and in person, whether it's online in video conferences, video calls, whether it's via email or some quicker form of messaging. That communication skill is really, really important. If you're going to be in a person-to-person facing role, but also if you're publishing papers, if you're authoring things, how you communicate in writing is important. Also, your passion. Let your passion show. You're doing really really important, really difficult pieces of research. You must have a passion for that to drive you forward. Let that show. Share that passion with people. Resilience. It's often underestimated, the power of resilience. We live in a very competitive world. Things won't always be perfect. They won't always go your way. So being resilient, being adaptable, being able to take setbacks and turn them into a positive. You've had a setback, but you've learned from it, and being able to adapt to the stimulus that's in front of you. Looking at when something isn't going to plan, how do you still manage to get to where you want to be? And I think amongst all of the things is to be curious. Quantum. There's a lot of things in quantum that people haven't yet worked out, or there's still a lot of room to grow, and a lot of that comes from curiosity. So I'm going to come back to the question that I mentioned, and and this was about the most common mistakes that early career researchers make when they transition from academia to industry. And I think actually this probably the biggest thing is it kind of comes it's a little bit wrapped around imposter syndrome, and that's not trying something. So I think with when you're making the transition, don't presume that you can't do something. You're much better off, applying for a role or having an interview. And I speak to a lot of people that think, "Oh, I'm not right because they've listed this 10 things and I can only do 9 of them." If you can do 9 of the 10 things listed, you're probably the best candidate out there. Some jobs, if you can do 2 or 3 of them, that's enough. But if you're making the application, you have a conversation and don't get the role, you're still better off for trying. So I think actually the self-limitation is probably the biggest thing that that limits people in that early stage. So I would say actually have some confidence, and if it doesn't go right, if you don't get a response, you've lost nothing from doing that. But I think actually try it. Be ambitious, go and try it, and don't see it as a major setback if you're not successful the first time. So that would be what I'd say if I had to pick one thing. And the next question I think links quite nicely, which is what is the best way to bounce back from making these small mistakes? And I think to an extent the answer's in the question. They're a small mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. And actually, if you make a mistake and you've recognized you've made a mistake, you're already better off than before you started. It's a little bit like you've seen something hasn't worked. You can then identify if that was just luck or why that didn't work, and you can make yourself stronger and better from that. So I would also maybe think, actually, this isn't necessarily a mistake or that terminology, but look at it as a learning curve. I look at it a little bit like ignorance. People think ignorance is an insult and a terrible thing, or I look at it as it's an opportunity to learn. If there's something I don't know, I get to learn something. And I think framing mistakes in that way is a little bit like it. So I think it's a mindset, and there's no magic wand. I can't click my fingers and make you all of a sudden more resilient and robust, but kind of take a little bit of a step back. And actually, these mistakes, they don't really matter in the big picture if you're able to overcome them and actually learn from it and become better and stronger. And I think some of this actually comes with imposter syndrome. So just to give some sort of context into this. So I first started in quantum in 2014. And at the time, it felt like I was the only person not just the only person without a PhD in quantum, but I didn't actually ever go to university. And I now lecture PhDs and postdocs at Harvard and MIT and Oxford and all these sorts of places. And this actually came to me when I gave my first online talk. It was, I think, 2019, 2020, maybe just the start of the pandemic. And I was doing my research. People were talking about imposter syndrome as a major thing, which I knew it was there, but not quite to this level. And I think, as someone who didn't even go to university, who was then giving the talk to overcome imposter syndromes, I think this is something that you can take on board, because if you're coming at this, whatever your background, you're coming into this arena and you know things that nobody else knows. You speak to a hiring manager. If you've done research, you definitely know things the hiring manager doesn't know. If you come from a non-research background, you almost certainly know things that they don't know about, maybe about business or personality and things like that. So I think actually framing that in the right way, and actually not dwelling too much on it on things as being a mistake, but actually this is something that's happened. You can't change the past, but actually you can use that to improve in future, or see it as an opportunity to optimize. That's what I would say with that. And it is important about the mindset piece. Actually framing that in the right way is important as well. So And the next question leads on to that quite nicely, which is what makes a candidate truly stand out to hiring managers in the quantum industry beyond technical experience? I think this is really, really interesting and important. So I mentioned earlier about, showing your passion, showing your drive. That's important because when you're applying for a role for academics, your academic credentials is what gets you the interview, and that's a really important thing. That gives them the confidence to interview, but your personality helps them hire you with confidence. So I mentioned before about the attributes. So if you bring in passion, if you bring in good communication skills, if you bring curiosity, confidence as well, the adaptability to different stimulus, these are things that really will mark you out from the crowd. And a couple of easy ways to do that. So some of those things are sort of personality attributes that you need to work on. You need to work on. You can't obtain them overnight, but you need to work on those things. And it is as incremental gains. If you're focused on being resilient, developing your communication skills, and being adaptable, these things over time you'll gain. But things like being curious and demonstrating passion, you've already got that in your locker. It's just a case of letting that show. And I think one of the things that also comes into play that's something you can implement is when you're applying for a role and when you're interviewing is your due diligence. So we live in a world now where before the interview, you should know who you're speaking to. You should know what the conversation is going to be about. You should know what you're expected to prepare. So with that, you know the company. Go and look at what the company is doing. What press reports have recently come out? What's their marketing material talking about? What financial statements have come out? What social responsibility things have they been doing recently? What's their EDI policy? All of these sorts of things. So when the conversation turns that way, you can reference I saw your latest financial results were XYZ. You've shown due diligence. The person interviewing you will think, they're detail orientated. They've done their research. You know who the hiring manager is. Go and have a look at their background. They got their degree from the same university you did. Perhaps they know someone in common, or they may have only just joined the company. You can ask them questions about how they found the company in their initial stages. You've seen they've been there for 10 years. Great. What still gets them up and motivated every day? You can ask them questions specifically about themselves. And that's really important because it shows you've done your due diligence and your research on the individual and the organization. There's also a psychological layer to it as well. So when people answer your question, you get a better answer because they're talking about their experience. And this is the real kicker that often isn't mentioned. People will talk to you, but when people talk to you about their work and their passion, they enjoy it, they like it. There's dopamine and endorphins getting released from their brain that get associated with you. So nice, good, fuzzy feeling inside that gets associated with you. And the last thing they remember, this is normally at the end of the interview, the last thing they remember is that warm, fuzzy feeling at the end of the call. And also, they're talking about their passion. There's a little piece of them that is kind of selling that to you, and they have a vested interest in you buying it. So there's those pieces added together. I think they make quite a compelling value add for an individual in an assessment type situation. So that's what I would mention with that. So the next one, actually, I think I really want to take this one, actually, which is how do you see diversity and inclusion evolving in the quantum ecosystem, and what impact does it have on innovation and recruitment practices? So I think with this one, I'd like to start this. So when I'm talking about people, I tend not to use too many statistics and data and things like that, because I think people don't neatly fit into a statistic. But I would mention one. So over the last 5 years, at Entangled Positions, we've actually placed 2 female candidates for 1 male candidate, and 2 ethnic minority candidates to 1 ethnic majority candidate. So the reason I mention that is I think we're a reflection of the industry in that I think there's often arbitrary blockages in place. So part of our role is to flatten those blockages and open up the pathway for the right person. So where you have companies that have more male than female employees, if we remove the blockages, it's easier to hire or more. It makes for better dynamics to hire a female employee rather than a male employee if the dynamics are out of sync, where there's no other discernible difference other than that. I think when you look at the ethnic minority to majority aspect, so I'm talking about the ethnicity within the countries we work in, and Quantum tends to be the organizations we work with tend to be mostly in Europe and North America. The ethnicity in those countries tends not to be reflected globally. Globally, there's a lot more diversity, and the common ethnicity in those countries isn't reflected globally. So we recruit around from around the world. So naturally, you would expect us to be hiring a more ethnically diverse workforce than is in those countries because of the makeup of the globe. So, and the reason I mention this within the quantum ecosystem is quantum has come from a place whereby most of the founders in quantum traditionally have come from an academic or research background. So within that, they don't, and this means that quantum didn't start with the previous biases and previous mistakes that traditional industries had. We're building things from the ground up, and it means that we don't have the bad habits. We don't have the systems in place that need to be broken down to start again. And I think quantum can be a good case study for other industries to look at in terms of what a responsible hiring process could look like, and how diversity and inclusion is kind of wrapped around what you've built is a core part of that that's built in, rather than having to sort of re-engineer it. So in terms of how that develops, I think that's less certain, because as things develop, there will be things brought in place or implemented from non-quantum industries, and we have to be quite mindful of that and make sure that we're taking the best of the non-quantum world, but keeping the best pieces of quantum. And I think the topics around diversity and inclusion are one of the things that quantum does much better than elsewhere. The caveat to that, though, I would say just one thing, is that a lot of the ideas around diversity and inclusion, they come from the academic and political arena. And there's a lot of well-meaning thought that goes into this, but there's also dogma. People take on information without questioning it. And I think this is also something that you should look at, you should question, you should ask yourself, well, why is this important? What do I think of this? Rather than just accepting what you're told is correct. And this is, I think, dogma's the kind of the enemy of I think progress anyway. But I think there's a lot of good within quantum, but I think we need to keep on our toes and make sure that we're not just accepting things that are repeated. But I think generally speaking, quantum's got a lot to offer non-quantum industries. So the next one as well, I think, tags into this quite nicely. So many young professionals in quantum come from highly technical backgrounds, have limited exposure to the business side of technology. and how important is that for them to develop the soft skills like communication and adaptability? And this is a really nice question, actually, because it touches on some of the things I've mentioned before. So when you look at the quantum ecosystem, there's a lack of business knowledge across the quantum ecosystem. When you look at non-quantum businesses, there's a lack of quantum knowledge, and the piece between is a path that isn't as wide as it should be. So, and within quantum, nobody knows everything, so there will be gaps. And I think when you look at developing the business skills, understanding the commercial motivation for where you work is important, because if your company and you are not commercially savvy and don't make money, the company doesn't survive past funding or doesn't get funding. So that's important. But you also need to look at what your role is. If you're not if you're in the lab and you're trapping ions with some lasers and some cryogenic systems, then you're not necessarily the one who's has to understand the full commercial viability and go and close business deals and things like that. So I think if you want to be in maybe the side of things where you go out and you present your work to others, you try and engage new business, and you try and bring companies and business and revenue in, then of course that's important, and there's a pathway to learn that. So I think the level of that depends on where you sit in an organization. But as a general rule, it's really good to understand why you're doing it and how the business pays for you and pays you, because the more you get that right, the more rewards you'll get as well. So the more financially valuable you are to a company, the more they will pay you is essentially that. So yes, it's important, but some roles it's less important than others. And I would also say the flip side to that, for those of you who aren't coming from a technical background, that maybe come from a business communication type background, there's also a place for you to come into quantum. And similar to that, depending on how technical you want to be, depends on how deep a level of quantum you should be learning. So those two sides of it's almost like they're two sides of the same bird, and you need both wings to fly well. So you need the business people, you need the technologists, and how you create a composite output between them is important. And where you sit on that spectrum will dictate how much of the technology, how much of the business you need to have. So the next one actually is about sort of emerging regions like Mexico and LATAM, where the quantum industry is still developing, and what advice I'd give students who aspire to enter the global quantum workforce. So I think this is really important. So I spent years talking at events, and people would constantly reference how there was a talent shortage, and it used to really frustrate me. I'd be on panels where I understand why they say it, and I used to constantly. I never used that phrase when I was talking publicly. I always spoke more about a skills gap, because I was speaking to people from all over the world, often from the global south, who, from LATAM, from Africa, from Southeast Asia, and other regions. And I used to see these really talented, really hungry, really energetic, bright, great communicating people with an incredible drive. And it was clear to me that the talent wasn't the problem, but how we implement that talent was. So in terms of practical advice, there's a few layers to this. And I think, first of all, often when you're coming from a background that maybe doesn't have all of the advantages, it creates a drive and a hunger that may not be there for someone who's had all of the tools at their disposal all of the time. So that's something to bring to play. I would also say that in academia, the global so being able to move from countries globally to study is entirely possible. The other thing as well is we hire our clients hire people from all over the world. I mean, I've placed people within quantum. I've placed people from every continent except for Antarctica into various roles. So whilst I'm not saying it doesn't add a layer of another layer of challenge, it's certainly not a blocker. And if you're able to demonstrate, so if you've got the skills to do the job, and then in the interview your drive, your hunger, your problem solving can come to play, there are some hiring managers that will value that really highly. So I think actually looking at understanding the things that you can bring is really important. And there's some things you may be able to bring that other people that may already be in that country can't. So I'm not saying that will happen every time, but there's an opportunity for that. And I also think in the countries where their country's not so far along the quantum journey, there's also an opportunity to work with the establishment and try and join up all of the different pieces of the ecosystem, and make the whole stronger. Because in most regions, there's for those people involved, there's kind of a pride and a real drive to bring their country up to speed with quantum. So I would also focus on that. Try and work with and harness the ecosystem in your local local city, country, but also in your region, and other areas within the global south. So maybe look at the African Quantum Congress as an example, or Vietnam have recently put their national sort of quantum body together and things like that. And there's a lot of countries doing this across the world. So look to join together and work out what may work in your region and what may not. So I would also reach out to I think he's talking at this, I'm not sure, but Raul Palacios as an example of someone who's doing some really good work in this space. So but yeah, and I like I say, I would really encourage you to strive to be everything you can, because there is opportunity out there, and it's a case of finding that right fit. So I think I'm just gonna follow on to the next stage of the talk and come back to some of the other questions, because I just want to talk about a few tips and a few quick wins as well for some practical advice. So we've touched on the communication side of things, which is important, and I think just in addition to that, networking is really important. So I'm sure most of you are on LinkedIn, have other content type channels and things like that. So on LinkedIn, reach out to people, connect with the people in your field, connect with the people who you aspire to be. So if there's someone who you think you'd like to be in 1, 2, 5, 10 years time, reach out to them, connect with them, and just say, I really admire where you've got to. I'd love to hear more about it. Would you be able to have a talk? Would I be able to speak with you? A lot of people will do so, and you can hear real world advice. You'll get that advice, or it may be actually they may be looking to hire someone that's just like you, whether that's now or in the future, and you've built up a rapport, a connection. So that reaching out and networking and is great to build your profile and guide you. It also is a really good antidote to imposter syndrome. You're speaking to these really eminent people that you think are like a demigod, and then you speak to them and they just become your friend, and you realize that these are human beings with their own strengths and weaknesses that become normal people. That can really help reduce the imposter syndrome that may be a blockage. And again, I'd reference just, understand what you're aiming for. So this is, the role, the scientific background, but also the organization or industry culture that you want to work in, and really understand what's important to you. And sometimes it may be you need conversations to understand what the potential is there. But again, that comes from networking and communication. And also, you're going to be doing really good, really interesting stuff. So share what you're doing, share your accomplishments, share your interest, whether that's in person, whether it's online. If there are conferences, that you can attend, do that, have the networking events and speak to people and just immerse yourself within the ecosystem. And it gives you a broader and deeper understanding of what it is, and it comes back to overcoming that imposter syndrome, working out what's happening, and being more adaptable. These are all great little things that over time will be the incremental gains will add up to something quite powerful. And you're all doing really great work. Be proud of it. Be humble, but be confident and proud in what you're doing. You're exceptional people. Don't think that just because you've not heard that enough, that's not true. That's just, if you're doing a PhD, it's probably because you haven't spoke to enough people. But be confident in yourself and what you're doing. And sometimes the more conversations you have, the more that you see that. Sometimes not everyone appreciates just how wonderful they are. And I think the more you speak to people and realize that, the more you can sort of see yourself in the mirror and see yourself how other people do. And again, this can help lead to knowing and understand what you want and what value you bring. If you have the mindset of I want to offer and receive value, that will take you a long way in life. And again, it's just that thorough preparation. So they would be a list of quick wins that I would say. And then I've got a really nice practical related question, which is about preparing CVs. So so the first thing I would say is kind of a bit of a tip that I wish I'd known before I'd set up my own company, and hopefully I won't be interviewing again. But I wish I'd known this when I used to to be employed, and that is, so with your CV, have a master document that details everything you've ever done in the most minute detail. Every time you do or learn something new, add it to the CV and have it as a constantly evolving document. So an academic CV will be a little bit like that in terms that it'll be incredibly detailed. And then what you do is when you're applying for a role, all you do is delete the things that are not relevant to the role. You've got a perfectly tailored CV in maybe 10 minutes rather than an imperfectly tailored CV in 2 hours or 10 hours. So have that really, really detailed CV and then just delete the stuff that isn't relevant. So your CV is then concise, to the point, relevant for the role, and is telling the person reading it exactly what you need. On top of that, know who you're sending it to. So HR or recruitment function, they probably want a 1 or 2 page CV because it's easy for them. They probably don't really understand the research to detail. However, if it's going to a PI or the chief scientist, they probably want to see a little bit about the research you've done. So maybe have both copies for that. And that way your short form CV will be tailored specifically to the role and will show that you've taken that seriously. And then the second part of that question is about having limited access to internships or industry projects, and about creative strategies to help gain relevant experience or connect internationally. So yeah, I think with that, so we don't get involved too much with placing people into internships, because people with internships tend not to come to recruiters. However, there are a lot of different courses, a lot of different, whether it's a hackathon, whether it's a formal course, Kiskit Summer School, for example, and these things, so doing a hackathon or a week course, that's not going to carry the same weight as a PhD, and it shouldn't do, because you spend years doing a PhD. You couldn't possibly cram that into a week. But if you're doing lots of these things and constantly engaged, you're building up a picture, a mosaic of all of these different things, and you're showing this interest and diverse background. So I would say, get involved in as many things as possible. In terms of the more sort of industry focused or internship focused, yeah, sometimes it can be difficult to go to an international internship. I think one of the things we're working on is trying to get, if it can't be in person, but to try to get remote access for project or internship based work for people in the global south to work with established companies in quantum. So this is something we're working on behind the scenes with some people I know. But that might also be an opportunity to get some remote work. Now, clearly, that's much easier if you're a developer than if you're a lab-based experimentalist. I appreciate that. There may be some sort of advisory role, but I think being active and being constantly involved with things is important to demonstrate that. But also, you'll gain and make connections as well, and one of those may be someone that can either introduce you or bring you onto a project. So I think the activity side of things is important. And then we've got the quantum workforce becoming increasingly global, and what practical ways they are for professionals from regions outside the traditional tech hubs like Latin America can stand out to international employers. And I think I would tie that to the last question. And I also think that in my experience, the non-traditional non-traditional quantum region, let's say, I think from personal experience, there is a drive, a hunger, a problems, and a sort of a relationship with problem solving, an energy that stands out. Now, I think from that's something that you can demonstrate in an interview situation more easily than on a CV. So I think adding all of that activity and the different the different activity I mentioned in the last question to try and get your foot in the door and get the interview. And then once you're in the interview, show that hunger, drive, desire, problem solving, all of these attributes that maybe people who have gone through a more traditional tech hub type route, they may not be demonstrating that because they don't have those attributes to the same level. Sandra, I know we started a few minutes late. Are we going on? Have we got a few more minutes to answer a few more questions?
If people can stay around, we can answer more questions because we have officially the lunch break. So
Perfect.
That's not the next talk yet. Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm gonna carry on with a few more of these questions. I'm enjoying this. This is good. These are great questions. So so here's a bit of a longer one. So I haven't read this yet. So hopefully we're traveling without a safety net. But from your experience advising governments and organizations, what key elements should countries like Mexico prioritize to build a sustainable talent pipeline? So I think with this, actually, this is really interesting. So we see that there's some countries that have had their sort of quantum strategy for a long time. So the UK is actually on its second quantum strategy, 10-year quantum strategy. It had the first one in 2014, and in 2024 was the second quantum strategy. Some countries haven't entered into their first yet, and we're kind of I can see this being somewhat of an inflection point whereby the countries that are further ahead are pushing quite far, or they're accelerating, and there's countries that are that maybe that are looking to catch up, but they're not organized. And I think the first thing is to have ecosystem interest. So if you've got the people to drive it, the interest and the people to drive it, that's a great starting block. You can focus on international relationships. So whereby I think if you can learn from the successes and failures that countries that are further developed made. So if there was something they did that wasn't good, bear that in mind when you're looking at your strategy. If there's other things you can almost copy and paste into your strategy that translate, that's great. But actually do translate it. So look at what the most relevant applications are. What are the key industries that a local quantum strategy can assist with? Because if, for example, it's agriculture, maybe that quantum can help disrupt, great. Look at some potential within agriculture, because then those industries that may benefit from quantum technologies can actually put money into it, and you create a virtuous cycle. It might be that it is mining or whatever it may be, but look at what areas are the lowest hanging, most profitable areas that quantum can that quantum can use, because then those industries can help drive forward the strategies around that. And working on those real world use cases creates really talented people that, and I think this actually goes, if you can get this right, this goes to a little bit back to a couple of the previous questions about developing skills and experience from the region, because if you're getting projects locally for real world commercial entities, that's something that you can put on your CV and talk about. And it may be that they're paid or unpaid, but if you say, well, we've worked with we worked on a farming project, and actually we optimized the water system so that there was 20% more growth, or whatever it might be. They're real world projects that show actual value. So, and then the next part of that question was, how can local academic institutions and research centres align better with the needs of global quantum companies? And communication is all about communication. Find out. So I think it's the emphasis is more on the quantum companies to tell academia what they need, because traditionally PhDs aren't necessarily done for a job at the end. They're done for the research purposes, adding to the sum of human knowledge. That's not necessarily the case in quantum. So there needs to be communication to say, okay, we see a dearth in people with error correction skills, or how FPGA engineers link up with optical engineers, or we need people with better communication skills, or whatever it may be. But academia and industry and government should oversee this, but they need to speak to each other to make that smoother pipeline of people. And I think as well, being able to nurture candidates so that they're able to translate more quickly into a business role. So some of the things that I've spoken about that help you get business ready, really being able to cement these things in place is important. And we're actually trying to work on a system where we work with organizations or companies, and we take people through a short training course to get them used to things like timekeeping, commercial realities, communication skills, overcoming imposter syndrome, and things like that. So I think that making the process more aligned with each other, but also looking at what goals industry has that academia can help with. And the final point is that many talented students don't yet see clear career paths in quantum. What message would I have to inspire confidence and purpose in pursuing this field? So I think this is really really interesting, because there is that uncertainty, and people see that as almost a negative. But I mentioned at the start that there's people in this people on this call today that are going to be absolute superstars in jobs that don't yet exist. And that is exciting. You can be doing something that nobody in the world yet even knows will exist. That's exciting. So I don't see it necessarily as a blocking point or a problem. See it as exciting. I'm sure if you go back 5 or 10 years, none of you in your PhD would imagine you would have done the research that you've done. Even if you're already along that track to doing so, there's going to be things that you couldn't foresee. And this is what's coming with quantum. There's a lot of things that don't yet exist and can't be envisaged or can't be worked upon. And you're the people that's going to be pushing that forward. So I think I would see that as an inspiration as opposed to a blockage as well. And there's a nice comment here that I learned the most from making mistakes and less from successes. And that's exactly right. I think that's a really, really important thing. This is where progress comes from, is learning from your successes. And I think the one of the nice phrases around that is that perfect is the enemy of progress. So I think there's a few of these that seem to be referencing the same thing. There's one that says someone doesn't have a PhD, and don't worry, I don't have a PhD, I don't have an MSc, I don't have a BSc, and I forced my way in 2014. But actually, if you don't have a PhD, we're seeing So the PhD route has always been heavily subscribed into quantum, but we're seeing more and more the number of roles for non-PhD students is growing at a more rapid rate, and actually there's a number of roles that actually fit better for people without PhDs on the business side, on perhaps on the product and engineering side as well. So there's infinite number of different pathways into quantum. And I would take you back to some of my earlier answers about working out what's important to you, and what you want to do and what your pathway is. And just the last bit. So the question was, what is the enemy of progress? Perfection. So just remember that it doesn't have to be perfect, but it should work. It should be effective. But I'd just like to thank everyone for all of the amazing questions today. It was really brilliant and we got through all of them. So I apologize if I was slightly rushed, if someone didn't catch all of that. I would encourage people to reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out, connect to me. I've got tens of thousands of connections. I think I'm on 20,000 or something in quantum at the moment. So that instantly connects you to a lot of the ecosystem. I've got lots of groups as well, so please do connect. And yeah, obviously, if there's anything that was missed, feel free to ask. I apologise if it takes me a little bit of time to get back. It's just been a crazy week in the UK for quantum events, with the showcase, NATO, UK Quantum, the Australian High Commission, all sorts of delegations from all over the world. So my inbox is carnage at the moment. So I apologise if it takes a bit of time to respond, but I've tried to get to them all. And I'd just like to thank everyone for their input today, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for this really special session. That was excellent. I'm always impressed if people don't need any slides. Thank you so much. This was very insightful. Yeah, thanks for encouraging everyone to connect. And with that, I think so our morning sessions are finished, and we start again at 2:30 Chicago time.
Now go and enjoy your lunch, everyone, and don't blame me for being hungry. I apologise if you're hungry in the afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, they
Bye-bye.
still have enough time. They still have enough time.
Ah, good. I'm going to go and have my dinner soon, so I'm thinking about food as well.
Thanks, Sean, for an excellent session, and very nice meeting you.
Thanks, Sandra. Thanks all. I'll be back on Monday as well, I believe, for a more sort of holistic view as well. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, Victor, again.
Bye.